Etymologists of Reddit, what is your favorite story of how a word came to be? My favorite Latin prefix is pen, which comes from pene, which means almost. So a peninsula is almost an island, the penultimate thing is almost last, etc. And penetrate means I can almost satisfy a woman. Oh boy, I love this game. Can I do more than one? Dingbat, a word with an incredibly diverse variety of meanings and applications. Dingbat first referred to an alcoholic drink in 1838. It quickly developed a meaning similar to words such as doohickey, gizmo, and thingamabob, which supply terms for items with unknown names. Throughout the next century and a half, dingbat came to denote a vast array of other concepts, including, but not limited to, one of a broad range of typographical ornaments, a la the typeface Zapf Dingbats by Hermann Zapf, a muffin, a woman who is neither your sister nor mother, a foolish authority figure, and, in the plural, male genitalia. While the word took on its current, most common sense of a foolish person as early as 1905, that definition was popularized in the U.S. by the TV show All in the Family in the 1970s. Tarnation, c. 1784, widely popularized among contemporary folk by the Warner Brothers character Yosemite Sam, e.g., what in tarnation. The term was originally an American English derivative of darnation, which was, predictably enough, a milder way of expressing the profanity damnation. The T in tarnation was influenced by tarnal, yet another mild 18th-century profanity derived from the phrase by the eternal, which was used as such. Joe paid a tarnal high price for his dilly-dallying. Peculiar, a deliciously self-describing word, its origins lie in the mid-15th century, when it meant belonging exclusively to one person and denoted the concept of private property. The English word derived its meaning from the Latin word peculiaris, which held a similar meaning. Peculiaris, in turn, was plucked from the Latin peculium, which implied private property, but literally meant property in cattle. One might consider livestock to be a curious root for a term referring to private property, but in ancient times, cattle were considered the most important form of property, and wealth was measured by the number of cows one owned. The current meaning of peculiar, i.e. unusual, arrived in the 17th century. This definition surfaced after the term evolved to mean distinguished, or special, in the late 16th century because, naturally, people blessed with bovine abundance were considered distinguished and special. Can I do more? I have more. Edit, people want more. This is so exciting. Periwinkle. Since the 1500s, the word periwinkle has been used as the name of two distinct items, an edible sea snail and a broadleaf evergreen plant, or, in its adjective form, the color of said evergreen plant. Edit, technical correction, clarification via u, seaside sarawak. As an adjective, periwinkle refers to the color of the periwinkle flowers, not the plant itself. The color is a mild blue-violet shade, the plant itself is dark green. Intriguingly enough, each of the two noun forms comes from a distinct root with disparate, though not entirely unrelated, origins. The name of the plant is a diminutive form of the 12th-century English word parvink, which is derived from the Old English word perwince, which is in turn derived from pervinca, the late Latin word for the periwinkle plant. Pervinca is likely derived from the verb pervincere, which means entwine or bind. More literally, pervincere could be read as thoroughly bound, from per thoroughly, and vincerate to bind or fetter. This root presumably refers to the way the creeping plant grows, thickly and carpet-like, across the ground or other surfaces, entwining anything in its path. What does that have to do with snails, you ask? The common periwinkle is a marine mollusk native to the northeastern Atlantic Ocean, particularly the European coastline, though they can now be found on North American coastlines as well, perhaps having traveled over while attached to mid-19th century sea vessels. These hitchhiking gastropods were likely called periwinkles as a cultural variation on their Old English name, pinewinkle. With entirely different origins from parvink, pinewinkle is comprised of the Old English pine, which is derived from the Latin word pina mussel, originally from the Greek pine, and winsel, which means spiral shell and comes from the Proto-Germanic prefix winkel, bend, curve. While it's fascinating that two words implying curling, bending, binding and entwining came from entirely different origins, it's not entirely clear why these two nouns converged into a homonym, graph, phone. It seems likely that it's due to the similarity between the sounds and meanings, particularly those of the diminutive attribute of the plant's name that implies its entwining growth, winkle from Latin, and the portion of the snail's name that describes its curved shell, the Old English Germanic winsel turned winkle. So, if you've ever asked yourself that age-old question, what the heck do flowers and snails have in common, the answer is periwinkle. Slang, popularized in English during the mid-18th century, slang referred specifically to the lexicon of tramps and thieves. Its origin may have been Norwegian, derived from the phrase slenge kjeften, which literally meant to sling the jaw, but which carried the implication to abuse with words. Its current meaning, informal but vivid colloquial speech used as a deliberate substitute for other terms or concepts in the same vernacular, became common in the early 19th century. The use of slang was popularized around the same time as the word slangwanger, an American English term meaning one who uses abusive slang, or a ranting partisan, especially one with orange hair. Just kidding. Tragically, slangwanger is uncommon in our current lexicon. Edit: I'm seeing many people insisting that slang is short for shortened language. I am unable to find a reputable source verifying this, and some outright say that it is false. I'm also doubtful that this is the case because slang terms aren't necessarily shorter than the terms they replace. Example: too big for one's britches replaces arrogant or cocky. On the contrary, the factors required for colloquialisms to qualify as slang are that they are informal, and they are specific to a particular social group or culture. I'm going to say this is probably false, but I definitely see why it's been spread as a believable factoid. Okay, so this one is actually an idiom. The phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" originated shortly before the turn of the 20th century. It's attributed to a late 1800s physics schoolbook that contained the example question, why cannot a man lift himself by pulling up on his bootstraps? So when it became a colloquial phrase referring to socio-economic advancement shortly thereafter, it was more or less meant to be sarcastic, or to suggest that it was a nigh impossible accomplishment. Eventually, however, the phrase's commonly accepted meaning evolved, and now when we tell people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, it's implying that socio-economic advancement is something that everyone should be able to do, albeit something difficult. Also, considering boots with bootstraps, or at least the shoe parts that are commonly called bootstraps, since boots with straps have existed for centuries, weren't popularized until about 1870, the character called Bootstrap Bill from Pirates of the Caribbean, which took place in the late 1700s, is a bit of an anachronism. Edit: lots of people have astutely pointed out that bootstrapping is also the origin of booting up a computer. Powder_keg also sagely informed me that this idiom is also the root of the bootstrap method, a common method used in mathematics. Aren't words fun? I suppose I could do some by request too, but I am at work, so there may be somewhat of a delay. Edit 2: wow, how thrilling to see such a wonderful response, and to hear from so many magical word enthusiasts. Thank you for the compliments and the shine. I've received a ton of requests for insight into specific words. I'll do some research when I get home in a few hours and try to respond to all of them. Edit 3, hopping back on to answer a few more from the comments with links below. In the interest of transparency, I would like to add that I am not paid to be an etymologist, though that would be living the dream, eh? I do, however, have some relatively extensive coursework in etymology and linguistics under my belt, plus a whole lot of enthusiasm for the history of the English language that has translated into something of a hobby. My degrees are in investigative journalism and literary analysis, and I work as the editorial director of a magazine and 2 websites, so I am a professional wordsmith of sorts, and I am no stranger to intensive research. My primary resource is the Oxford English Dictionary, and you can find many of the hard facts at Etymonline, which draws from the OED. I also supplement what I find in the OED with additional research from reputable sources online and from other etymology books from my shelf. Plus, as you can see, I editorialize a bit for the sake of interest, accessibility and humor. More words and phrases. Cattywampus. Universe. Strumpet. Nerd. AAAND. I'm out of space. My favorite word origin is muscle, derived from the Latin word musculus, which translates to little mouse. When physicians were first observing the musculature, it is said that they remarked that the muscles in the biceps and calves, most notably, looked like mice running under the skin. Edit: grammar mistake. Thanks, Salax1. The word daisy comes from the Old English for day's eye, as the flowers open during the day and shut again at night. Traitor and tradition have the same root word because both involve handing something over. Nimrod. In most places it means a hunter, warrior, however in the US it means someone easily confounded, because Bugs Bunny called Elmer Fudd a Nimrod, and people didn't know what it meant. A lot of words filtered down from the Age of Sail. The word scuttlebutt for instance was a cask, a butt, kept near a opening, a scuttle, to the lower decks. Sailors could grab a drink of water from it and would natural gossip around it. It's identical to our use of the word water cooler talk to refer to gossip. Also, towrag, affectionate term a grandparent would call a misbehaving small child, originally the frayed end of a rope dangling into the water at the head of the ship, used for cleaning one's backside. Not enough room to swing a cat, referring to an enclosed space. Reference to the cat o' nine tails, a whip with 9 knotted ends that was used to punish sailors. Square meal, in the age of fighting sailors required up to 5,000 calories a day with all the manual labor. They were given stodgy, large meals served on square wooden plates, boards for easy storage and harder to break, so the term became synonymous with a good meal. I could go on all day but these are my favorite. Thank you Op for such a thoughtful question, a very interesting thread. Also, the bitter end. An anchor line was secured to a bitts or cleats mounted in the bow. Once all of the line was let out, the line was said to be at its bitter end, meaning no more line could be let out. So to fight to the bitter end, means until there is nothing left to give. Ultracrepidarian is a person who gives opinions beyond his area of expertise. The story goes that in ancient Greece there was a renowned painter named Apelles who used to display his paintings and hide behind them to listen to the comments. Once a cobbler pointed out that the sole of the shoe was not painted correctly. Apelles fixed it and encouraged by this the cobbler began offering comments about other parts of the painting. At this point the painter cut him off with ne sutor ultra crepidam, meaning, shoemaker, not above the sandal, or one should stick to one's area of expertise. Addition, the story was told by the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, hence Latin. Thanks, you, smiles 134. I thought the word for that was redditor. Not a specific word, but rather a whole group of words. Consider that we call many animals by a different name than the food from them. Cow beef, pig pork, chicken poultry, deer venison. This can be traced back to the Norman conquest of England in the 11th century, when the French came and took the crown. When the dust settled, England had French nobility ruling over peasantry with Germanic origins. As a result, the languages used were a mishmash of French and Germanic. What does this have to do with food? The peasantry raised the animals, so the names of the animals have Germanic origins. Cow from Sioux, pig from pickbread, deer from dire or tear. Although they raised the animals, it was the nobility who ate the majority of them, so the words for the food come from French. Pork from pork, beef from buff, venison from venison. Obviously this doesn't hold true for all foods, especially those from the New World, which was many centuries after the Norman conquest. And modern language has begun to eliminate some of the usages, such as calling the meat chicken instead of poultry. The Norman conquest of England. This gives us word pairs like hearty and cordial as well. Of course, cordial is from the French cœur, so hearty and cordial share from the heart connotation. Notice, however, that cordial is more formal, a cordial bow, while hearty is more colloquial, a hearty slap on the back. The subtle difference reflects the fact that cordial was used by Norman aristocrats while hearty was used by Saxon peasants. Another fun one is violin and fiddle. Both are describing literally the exact same instruments no matter how many times I've had that argument, but it came about as the Norman invasion. The regular people used the Germanic word, fodel, while the aristocrats used violin, and so eventually fiddle evolved to be the name of the instrument when it's used in a more folksy and all-encompassing way, such as bluegrass, folk, or country, whereas the violin is usually used to talk about the instrument in classical music and other genres. However, the name violin has become more popular. Eavesdropping. Before the invention of guttering roofs were made with wide eaves, overhangs, so that rain water would fall away from the house to stop the walls and foundations being damaged. This area was known as the eavesdrop. The large overhang gave good cover for those who wished to lurk in shadows and listen to others' conversations. Since the area under the eaves was considered part of the householder's property, you could be fined under Anglo-Saxon law for being under the eaves with the intention of spying. The Yucatan Peninsula is so named because in one of the local languages, Yucatan means something along the lines of "I can't understand you." I just imagine conquistadors landing, finding natives, and asking them, "What is this land called?" "I can't understand you." Yucatan it is. Edit. Full disclosure, conclusive etymology has not been established for the name. From what I've read, this theory seems to be quite plausible, but other, plausible theories exist. Apologies for not adding this earlier. Terry Pratchett's Discworld contains many mountains named the local language's words for "that's your index finger, idiot." The word you're looking for is "skund." Translates to "your finger you fool." There is also Mount Alskenrahad, which translates to "who is this fool who does not know what a mountain is?" There's a pond in Finland called Onpahanvanlampi, from proper Finnish Onpahanvanlampi, roughly translating to, well, it's just a pond. An apron became an apron. Also my favorite, helicopter. People break it up into heli and copter to make new words like helipad and newscopter. But it's really made up of helico and pter, which mean spiral, helix, and wing. And that's why pterodactyl begins with a P. Tuxedo comes from the Lenape, an American Indian language, word for crooked river. I like this because on the surface, it seems to make no sense. It turns out that tuxedo, as the name for a dinner jacket, comes from Tuxedo Park, NY, where they became popular in the late 1800s. The word pumpernickel. It's a dark rye bread, 1756, Pumpernickel, from German, Westphalian dialect, Pumpernickel, 1663, originally an abusive nickname for a stupid person, from pumpern, to break wind, plus nickel, goblin, lout, rascal, from proper name Nicholas, see Nicholas. An earlier German name for it was Krankbrot, literally, sick bread. There is legend that the term was coined by Napoleon when he recived a pumpernickel and replied that it's only good enough to feed it to his horse Nickel by saying, "Bon poor Nickel." I was thinking of the word pumpernickel the other day and had a fleeting memory that it meant fart goblin. Shook that off as it seemed ludicrous. Sinister comes from the Latin word, also, sinister, meaning left, because left-handed people were blamed for being cowards, evil, demons, whatever, your typical scapegoat. Even in Italian, sinistra still means left, not sure about other Romance languages though. And the English word left comes from a Germanic word for weak. Similarly, dexterous for being skilled with the hands comes from the Latin dexter, referring to right as a side or direction, i.e. a right-handed person. Edit. To clarify, I said the weak-left connection comes from early Germanic language, not current German. This site suggests it can be traced from Old English's lift for weak, which is cognate to East Frisian loof, and dialectical Dutch loof. Ambidextrous equals both right? One of my favorite is that the phrase hands down comes from horse racing and refers to a jockey who is so far ahead that he can afford drop his hands and loosen the reins, usually kept tight to encourage a horse to run and still easily win. Source. Horse racing has provided a bunch of common idioms like photo finish and dead ringer, but hands down is the one that people never expect. Duns, meaning idiot, comes from the name of Johannes Duns Scotus, a medieval philosopher and theologian who was really caught up in the battle that raged over the status of universals. He was a really good arguer, not as great as Abelard, but easily on the level of Occam. Yes, that's the Occam of Occam's razor, so spiteful IRL trolls who couldn't face him in the court of logic just turned his name into a pejorative and fought him in the court of public opinion. After he had been dead for 200 years. That's how much that guy ruled. I personally don't agree with his views on the metaphysical status of universals, but I have to admit that it's pretty baller that people are so afraid of your logic and argumentative skills that it inspires this kind of response. Dord, meaning density. It's less of a word actually used in conversation, and more of an etymological novelty, but I love it. When Webster's dictionary was copied by hand decades ago, one transcriber received a definition D or D, density. He misinterpreted the abbreviation as a complete word, and copied Dord, density. A current favorite of mine is dog. We don't know where this word comes from. It isn't from the Germanic languages or even Indo-European. You've got Saxons using Hund, Normans saying Chian, priests writing Canis, and everybody starts saying dog. Now for an actual story of how a word came to be. The English word slave comes from the word Slav. Slavs were commonly taken and sold as slaves throughout Europe and the Mediterranean world during late antiquity, Middle Ages. Seriously, everyone enslaved these people: the Germans, the Scandinavians, the steppe tribes, the Byzantines, and especially each other. They were so common as slaves in fact that the name for the people came to be used as the word for the commodity, status. A current favorite of mine is dog. We don't know where this word comes from. It isn't from the Germanic languages or even Indo-European. You've got Saxons using hunt, Normans saying chien, priests writing canis, and everybody starts saying dog. And then there's an Australian Aboriginal language where the word for dog is also dog. This is a complete coincidence. Or is it? Shocking discovery. Britain colonized by Aboriginals. This might be buried, but I was so excited when I saw this post. Etymology is one of my favorite things, ever. Here are some of my favorites. February, this is definitely my favorite fun fact to tell people. Most modern, Christian holidays correspond with pagan holidays, and Valentine's Day is no different. The ancient Romans had a similar holiday called Lupercalia that took place from February 13 to 15. One of the main things celebrated and encouraged at this festival was fertility. Obviously, the best way to make girls more fertile is for men to run around naked, swatting virgins with goat skin thongs, strips of leather, called februa. And that's why we call the month February. Edit, as several commenters have pointed out to me, this one is probably not true. Which is sad, because it's hilarious. Anyway, a more accurate etymology seems to be that there was another festival, called Februa, which was about ritual purification. That festival was basically absorbed into Lupercalia, which was not only about fertility, but also purification. So, note, this is probably not totally correct. But it's cool and funny, and at least related, smiley face. Money, in ancient Rome, the mint, all the monies, was kept in a temple of Juno on the Capitoline Hill. At one point, some other group of people were going to attack Rome, I don't remember who. As they were coming up the hill, the geese who lived there started squawking and alerted everyone to the fact that they were being attacked. The Romans believed that Juno had sent them this warning, and because of this, the temple became the Temple of Juno Monita, Juno the Warner. So, the word money comes from the word monir, to warn. Utopia, you may know this word as meaning something along the lines of a perfect paradise. It actually comes from the Greek o, meaning not, and topos, meaning place, because a utopia is an impossible place, something that couldn't exist. Along these lines, dystopia just means a bad utopia. Edit, a lot of people have been asking about this, so here's a more in-depth explanation of the word dystopia. The word was coined after utopia by John Stuart Mill and based directly on it. Shambles, this is a personal favorite because it's so convoluted. The Latin word it's derived from, scamillus, just means a little stool or bench. Shambles originally meant a stool as well. The word then came to mean, more specifically, a stool or stall where things were sold. Then, a stall where meat was sold. Eventually, a meat market. Then, a slaughterhouse. Eventually, shambles just came to mean a bloody mess. That was a pun. Shambles now just means something along the lines of a scene of destruction. I've got more if you're interested. I studied Latin for 8 years, and derivatives were always what caught my attention. Edit, here are 5 more. Colosseum, you might think that the Colosseum in Rome is so named because it's, well, huge. It's actually because it had a colossus, which is a really big statue, outside of it. It's 98 feet tall. Note, this is theorized. Dinosaur, I feel like a lot of people may know this, but it's fun nonetheless. It comes from Greek dainos, meaning terrible, awesome, mighty, fearfully great, etc., and sauros, meaning lizard. So, a big ol' scary lizard. Flossinocenialopilification, this is my favorite word because its etymology is hilarious. It basically means the estimation of something as worthless or valueless, but it comes from 4 Latin words that all mean the same thing: floci, nasi, nihili, and pili, all meaning something like at little value or for nothing. Total absurdity. Vanilla, bet you didn't know that this delicious flavoring comes from the Latin word vagina? Vagina in Latin means sheath, insert giggles here. Another meaning of sheath, the hull, husk part of a plant. Vagina becomes Spanish vena, also meaning sheath, which becomes the diminutive form vanilla, meaning vanilla plant. If you're confused, take a look at this picture of one. Camelopardalis, my username. This is a Latin word, so maybe not what you're looking for, but hilarious still. The word camelopardalis is just Latin for giraffe. But it's a portmanteau of two other words, meaning they just took two words and smushed them together, camelus, meaning camel, and pardalis, meaning panther. Why? Because the ancient Romans and Greeks thought a giraffe looked like a cross between a camel and a panther. Somehow. Note, the Latin is just a romanization of the Greek words camelopardalis, camelos and pardalis. Edit, again, lots of people are commenting about this one. Pardus, male, and pardalis, female, really do mean panther. However, it's likely that they eventually came to also mean leopard. So leopard spots, giraffe spots. You get the idea. P.S. One of my favorite etymology nerd things is this set of maps. I have two of them. Edit, yes, I am a classics nerd, not so much an etymologist. But I love word origins and I'm happy I get to share some of my favorites with y'all. Obligatory edit, yeah, I know, but, holy shit, thank you for the gold. Not an English word exactly, but rather an unexpected, cross-family connection. Now, as you may know, English is a member of the Indo-European language family, which includes languages from Icelandic to Bengali. Japanese, however, is not, and is most likely unrelated to any other language on Earth. 1, 2. Check this out though, the Japanese word, well, maybe it's a bound morpheme, for honey is mi, typically cubed pronounced as mitsu, or mitsu. Then, there's this English word, mead, which is an alcoholic beverage made from fermented honey. Now, mead and mitsu certainly sound similar, but to imagine that they are in any way related is surely a stretch of the imagination. Turns out they're cognates. That is, they come from the same root. How, you ask? Well, English mead comes from Old English medu, from Proto-Germanic medas, still referring to mead. This, in turn, came from Proto-Indo-European med-u, one of 2-4 words in Pi meaning honey. Japanese mitsu is a borrowing from Middle Chinese mi mjit, preserved in plenty of modern Chinese languages, e.g. Mandarin mi, which was borrowed from one of the African Tocharian languages, which are an extinct group of Indo-European languages that were spoken in the Tarim Basin in modern Xinjiang, China. Honey, in Tocharian b, for example, was mit. This came from Proto-Tocharian mt, from, you guessed it, Proto-Indo-European med-u. TLDR, Japanese word for honey, mitsu, mi comes from the same root as English mead, Proto-Indo-European med-u, meaning honey. To get to Japanese, it had to pass through the now extinct Tocharian languages, to Chinese, and then to Japanese. Well, it actually is part of a larger family, the Japonic languages, which include several varieties of Japanese, and the Ryukyuan languages, but this is a pretty tightly knit family. Squared also, there are a few different proposals which do try to place the Japonic languages into a larger family, including several instantiations of the Altaic hypothesis but such groupings remain highly controversial. Cubed in Japanese, many characters or kanji have multiple words which represent different pronunciations and or meanings. 4 The words for honey in many other languages of Europe like Spanish or French meal for example come from that other root. No etymologist here, but I love words. The word sardonic comes from a sardonia mushroom. It was fabled that if you ate it, you laugh until you die, bringing sardonic humor to a whole other level. I'm not an etymologist, however I like the origin of the czar or however else it's spelled. The word comes from the Caesars of ancient Rome. It's a contraction, if you prefer. It makes sense if you think about how the Caesars were the emperors of ancient Rome for generations and how that would link to the word czar, csar. Tragedy basically means goat song. From the Old Greek words for goat tragos and song oid, which we also get the word ode from. Goat song. This presidential election cycle is a complete goat song. The words candidate and candid both come from the Latin candidus, meaning bright white. Orators, high-ranking Roman politicians would wear very clean, white togas when speaking to crowds to essentially show their trustworthiness. Thus, the English word candid's modern definition of honest or trustworthy ties back to the perceived honesty of politicians. Kinda funny when you look at politicians today. Uppercase and lowercase come from hand printing when they were literally stored in different cases. So around the Industrial Revolution time in France, workers protested their terrible working conditions by throwing their shoes sabots into the machines to prevent them from working. Hence, sabotage. Edit, so apparently this isn't true after all. Time to find a new go-to fun fact about words to share. Not an etymologist, and this word is Filipino. Here, we say appear, apir, when we want to high-five. Apparently, we misheard the Americans saying up here for appear, lol. This next one hasn't been confirmed. I've had suspicions about it. Culit means someone who is hyper or being annoying. We probably misheard Americans say coolit and the word just stuck. Entomology. Oh, you mean etymology. Never mind. I was ready to give you many bug facts. I'll leave you with bugs are icky. Nazi. Not many people realize that it was an insult long before the National Socialists came to power, and they never called themselves that. You see, lots of Bavarian farmers were Catholics. And lots of Catholics named their children after Saint Ignatius. And so, lots of people called Ignatius came to be viewed as dumb hicks, which, by the way, is an insult that came from English peasant farmers named Richard. And Ignatius, Ignatius in German pronunciation, having 4 syllables is shortened to Nazi. Calling the National Socialists Nazis is a bit like calling a made-up political party, the Red States for the next America, the Rednecks. I love that the word evil used to just mean uppity and just slowly got worse and worse connotations over time. Edit, I got this from my etymology dictionary by John Ida, but maybe the word has a disputed source. Villain as well. It used to be just some peasant, who didn't own land. LMAO, they turned the word for poor into what it is now. Not etymologist, but avocado is great because it comes from a Central American word for testicles, a rather fitting name for a fruit that looks like that. Not to mention they both taste great roughly smashed up with a fork and with a little salt and lime juice. I read the title as Enzymologists and then realized that I was incorrect after reading the first comment. But, I'm going to answer anyways. There are so many proteins in the body that do a number of jobs, estimates between 50,000 to 100,000 types. Some of these proteins are called kinases. Kinases are responsible for adding a phosphate to a protein. My favorite kinase is called JAK, which is short for just another kinase. Scientists are not always especially creative, but this cracks me up every time. On a side note, there is now JAK1, JAK2 and JAK3. An addict has ancient Roman roots, where soldiers were gifted with slaves that did their bidding. These slaves were called addicts. This connects to modern use due to the idea that someone is a slave to whatever their addiction is. Finally, my time to shine. Musk comes from the Sanskrit word muska, which means scrotum, because the glands of the deer species that secretes musk look a lot like balls. Algebra comes from an Arabic text on mathematics and means something similar to joining or restoring, as in restoring the sides of the equation to a balance. I believe algorithm is also related to this. A common expression for a place out in the middle of nowhere is the boonies or boondocks, which was taken during the colonization of the Philippines from the Tagalog word bundok, meaning mountain. This one might be a bit too geeky, but here goes. The word shibboleth is used to describe some sort of sign or marker that distinguishes insiders and outsiders of a certain group. A modern example would be that Houston Street in New York City is pronounced like house rather than like Houston, Texas. So you can typically tell a native New Yorker from a tourist by their pronunciation. On to the etymology. The word itself comes from Hebrew and means the part of a plant that has grains on it, but the interesting thing is how the word was used. Basically, there were 2 warring tribes, one group, the Gileadites, who had a sh sound as part of their native language, and another group, the Ephraimites, who didn't have that sound. The Ephraimites were defeated by the other tribe and tried to cross the Jordan River to return home but were stopped by some Gileadites who rightly suspected that they were enemies. The Gileadites asked them to pronounce the word and they couldn't, so the rest of the Ephraimites were slain. I'm a huge nerd for this kind of stuff, so I have many more of these if you guys are interested. Edit, I'm just gonna keep adding more as I think of them. The city-state of Singapore gets its name from way back in the 13th century. A prince and explorer as well as his crew landed on the island after surviving a rough storm. He saw a strange-looking animal emerge from the jungle and asked one of his crew members what it was. He replied that it was lion, even though we know that it was probably actually a tiger. The explorer took this as a good omen and named the land Singapura, Singa meaning lion and Pura meaning city in Malay. Singa comes from Sanskrit as well and is also the root word for Singa beer, which explains the mythological lion on the bottle. Soccer is a word that can cause a lot of tension between Americans and non-Americans, but the word was actually invented in the UK. Once upon a time around the early to mid-1800s, sports like rugby and football were quite popular but didn't yet have a standard set of rules for professional play. Some people sat down and outlined the rules for a game called association football, which the British public shortened to ASoccer or soccer before switching to just football. When the rules of that game were spread to America, there was already a popular sport known as football, so the name soccer had to stay. Also, football is called football because it was played on foot as opposed to on horseback, not because of the amount of foot-to-ball contact. One of my favorite transformations of words is how the Latin version of torch-bearer turned into a name of the Christian devil. Quarantine comes from the Venetian quarantina, meaning 40. During the Black Death, ships were ordered to spend 40 days outside of Venetian ports. If the crew members didn't develop plague after 40 days they entered Venice, if not, they likely were all dead. The Venetians likely would have just scuttled the vessels found to be infected. This isn't answering the question, but maybe I can get an answer here. Funny enough, I was wondering about this in a thread over in r horror. So to you etymologists, is there a word for when you mix up phrases? Like if I was to say, she's not the sharpest bulb in the pack of crayons? Which is mixing up, not the sharpest tool in the shed, brightest bulb in the chandelier, and not the brightest crayon in the box. Or someone else chimed in with, it's not rocket surgery. Which is combining, it's not rocket science, and, it's not brain surgery. What you're describing is a malaphor. Related terms that you might find interesting are spoonerism, speakers switching initial sounds. Malapropism, speakers switching similar sounding words. Eggcorn, speakers switching semantically similar words. Mondegreen, listeners switching similar sounding words. Flammable, derived from _inflammable_ meaning able to become inflamed. Makers of safety warnings, for on the sides of trucks, canisters etc., were afraid the public would think inflammable meant not flammable, thus undercutting the intention of the warning label, leading to the change. So, flammable and inflammable mean the same thing. For me it is vandalism. The Vandals, an ancient Germanic people, are associated with senseless destruction as a result of their sack of Rome under King Genseric in 455. As a German, this makes me a little proud. Thanks for watching our video. If you like it, please smash the subscribe and like button to support the channel, so that we can create more quality content in the future.